Hello, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of Pastatime with the Scariest Podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace, this is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And I don't think we did a sound. Did you do a sound check before we started?
No, I just started recording, in fact, so.
I'm Robin Grace, this is Adam Diaz. Did I already say that?
Yep.
We're here to read you folks some pastas, some creepy pastas, you could say.
Indeed we are.
That's what pasta times are.
So creepypastas are stories that you can find on the internet that are short story, fictional, horror-themed stories. Sometimes we go to creepypasta.com. Sometimes we just go on to like Reddit and see if people have stories that they've written or their favorite stories that they found on the internet. Sometimes we check out the SCP Foundation, stuff like that. We are going to be reading 2 creepypastas this week. We did 3 last week. One of them was super long, and I think the episode was almost an hour. So I have a long one this week. So we're going to read 2. Mine's long. Robin's is shorter, but it's not super short. So that's what we're going to do. Before we dive into it, I think Robin had something happen. It's actually happened twice now.
Yeah.
That she was like, I have to talk about this on the show.
Well, I just think it's so funny. So, thank you to everybody who has wished me good luck and good vibes for this school semester, because I need it. And it just started this week. So this week was the first week of school for the summer, and I'm dumb. So, with all the new regulations with like social distancing, things like that, they are putting small groups of kids in much larger classrooms. So I'm in like not a studio. What is it called? When the classroom is just a giant room with all
I know
the
what you're
seats.
talking. It's like stadium seating, but
Yeah.
I don't know what they exactly call it. Like
Okay.
a theater, maybe?
Yeah, it's huge. It's a huge room with just kids spread out everywhere. So you're really far away from the board, right? The board where the person's writing everything on. And half the time, this person's writing with a very illegible pen, like an orange pen on a whiteboard. You can't see anything. I'm an idiot.
Auditorium.
Auditorium, that's the word. Okay. So I have prescription sunglasses. That's what I use to drive all the time.
She also has many prescription glasses, just regular glasses, but she just never has them with her.
I don't carry them with me unless we're traveling. If we're traveling, like when we go to California, I remember my glasses, my actual glasses. This week, school started, and instead of me bringing my regular glasses, I just have my sunglasses, which are pretty fucking sick. I think they're cool. They're some Persols, but they look like, kind of like Club Masters. They're like the Persol version of Club Masters, sort of. They're bigger than those, but,
they don't look like prescription glasses.
They don't look like
They look like
sunglasses.
sunglasses.
So I can't see anything in class. So half the time I'm pulling my sunglasses from the top of my head down so I can read. So I have fucking sunglasses on in the middle of class. Today I noticed my teacher staring at me.
Because she just has to be the fucking cool kid in class pulling down her shades to look badass.
So I'm just reading the board with my freaking sunglasses, and she's just staring at me. I'm like, I swear to God, I'm paying attention. But it happened earlier this week, too, on Sunday. Was it Sunday? I think it was Sunday.
It was Sunday.
We went to hang out with family and friends. And
we went to Area 15 out here in Las Vegas.
Which, if you folks have not been to, I recommend the Omega Mart thing that's there. It's
super fucking cool.
Meow Wolf art installation stuff. And it was really cool, really fun. But we went to lunch afterwards. And you can't tell that my sunglasses are eyeglasses. So we went to get food, and one of the menus was behind my sister and our friend Ralph, who's been on the show a couple times. And I can't read the menu behind them. So I have to pull my sunglasses down to read behind them.
Again, because she does not take her glasses
the
anywhere.
The waiter's trying to take our order. I pull my sunglasses down to read, and Ralph just goes like, what the fuck is this? Jarvis all up in this? Are you reading the menu through your glasses? I'm like, oh my God.
Because she's like, hang on, let me check the menu. And then she just like lowers her glasses, and we're all like, what the fuck are you talking about?
So it was just very funny. Just a story and a little anecdote to remind everybody, if you wear glasses, bring your glasses.
It's probably good to have your corrective eyewear
yes.
if you need it, especially if you're going to need to read or see while you drive. So, good.
That's my
helpful,
pasta time for the episode.
Good, helpful
JKL.
hints. That's not a pasta time. That's straight up happened.
That's a straight up true story. Okay.
I would like to mention, however, she mentioned Omega Mart, which is an art installation inside Area 15, which is sort of like an art place. I don't know if it's an art place so much as it's just like a hipster mall almost.
Mm-hmm.
But it's out here in Las Vegas, and the Omega Mart thing is fucking awesome. We're absolutely going back. If I can figure out some way that we can have some sort of crossover with Scary-ish and the Omega Mart, it would be amazing to do. It's like a parody of a grocery store. And we were walking through, and everything in there is a product you can actually buy. But they're never what they really appear to be. I don't have them next to me, but basically I bought like this bottle of pills that's supposed to like cure your mood. And they're actually highlighters. And all the stuff in there kind of looks like something that has a real world counterpart. And as we're walking through the grocery store and taking all this in, like, oh, this is really neat. There is one like freezer door, and it's in the middle of a bunch of real freezer doors that have a bunch of drinks in them. And I look in there, and there's a person behind the door. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Oh, you can probably walk in there. So I'm like, I'm going to go in. So I went in there, and in the back room is an office with all these letters and shit. And I'm like, I might as well read these. Like, I paid for a fucking ticket. And it has this like huge mystery that's unfolding as I'm going through them. And me and Ralph are finding all these clues. We had a really large group, and we all got separated because it is enormous. It is like the size of an actual Walmart once you actually get into the back of it.
It's bigger than Walmart.
There's slides and shit everywhere. It's like 3 stories tall. It's a bunch of stuff that is there, and you're like, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to interact with this. Like the grocery store, you know, you have the red phones that employees can pick up and like make announcements. Those exist in the grocery store too, or in Omega Mart. And I realized like, well, this is an art installation, so I'm going to do it. So I picked it up and I like called the number on the thing. And that 100% feeds into the storyline too. At one point, like the lights went out when we were getting ready to leave.
Oh, that was terrifying.
And the TVs came on. It was like crackling in the grocery store side of things, not the hidden side. And it was like anonymous style, like announcement, like this is what you're being poisoned with. There's so much to it that I'm like, I need to go back. It almost felt like a real life Fallout situation. I would definitely go back.
There's a bunch of there's like 3 different slides. One was like a 3-story slide. I felt like it was just huge.
I watched one kid totally bitch out of the slide. He sat down on it, and the employee's like, cross your legs, put your arms across your chest, blah, 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 blah. I was like, okay, I got this. Okay, I got this. Okay, I got this. I don't fucking got this. Okay, I got this. Oh my God, I don't think I got this. She's like, do you want to see your friend go first? And he's like, yeah. So he stood up. His friend went immediately. He sat back down, did this for like 2 more minutes, and finally was like, I can't do it. And like got up and walked away all dejected. I was like, oh, that poor kid.
I was scared when I went down that mid slide.
Which wasn't even 2-story slide.
Yeah, I just went down the mid-level slide. And even when I put my feet in, I was like, oh God.
I skittered down it. I didn't have as good of a time going down the slide.
Oh, I did. My butt totally slid. And I was afraid because I was wearing shorts. So I was like, oh, my thighs are going to catch. It did not.
I need to go back. I need to bring a notebook with me. I need to keep track of all my clues and see what the hell is happening because it was just really fun. And I highly recommend it to anyone, especially if you're a Vegas local. And if you're visiting Vegas, it's something that's really near the Strip that you could go out and enjoy. It's a super fun time.
Yeah.
Also, the Van Gogh exhibit's going to be at Area 15
at Area 15 too. Yeah. But yeah, that was our life. Welcome.
Yeah. We don't give you guys as many updates on our life. Mainly, I think we stopped doing that because COVID hit. And it's like our life is sitting at our desks doing nothing. Now that the world's kind of opening back up and we're vaccinated and we're venturing back out there, we're like, well, let's just fucking talk about stuff we're doing again. Oh my God, we haven't done that so long. Mm-hmm. So hopefully no one's like, oh my God, get to the pasta time. So if you do feel like that though, here comes some fucking pasta for you. I believe Robin is going to be going first this episode, if I'm not mistaken.
Cool. Sorry, there's something in my teeth.
I'm pretty sure I swallowed a bug while talking just now. So
really, I thought a bug flying around.
Yeah, flew by, and then at one point I thought I felt something in the back of my throat.
Oh, remember when I was reading the other
episode.
day? Yeah, and I totally choked on something.
The difference is I just swallowed it like a champ, and you coughed and hacked like you were dying.
Yeah, because it hurts. You try. I don't know.
I just did.
Yeah, I was gonna say
like a champ.
Whatever. Okay. I'm going to get into my first story here. My first story is called Doors. Now all I'm thinking about is that stupid Rick and Morty episode where it's like, fake doors. I just sell fake doors.
Oh, yeah. Also, if it sounds like there's traffic in the background, there is. It's because we basically have a fucking speedway behind our goddamn office that at 6:45 at night is just so active and it's so annoying. So I'll do my best in post to take those out. But yeah. Pretty fucking annoying. We apologize for that.
All right. So the story. Let's get into it. I gotta get into my creepypasta voice, right? Can't be too chipper. I'm having coffee, so I'm a little energetic, but I gotta get somber for the creepypasta.
You're way more than little energetic.
I gotta get creepy.
She almost collapsed the entire desk right before the show started. Like she went to scooch in her chair and she just slams into the desk and everything shakes. So, all right. Zen moment. Go ahead, Robin. Take it. take it from here.
The story begins. I was adopted. I never knew my real mother. Rather, I knew her at one time, but I left her side when I was too little to be able to remember. Which is the story of the lives of all pets ever, puppies and cats. And probably birds, I don't know. I loved my adopted family, though. They were so kind to me. I ate well, I lived in a warm and comfortable house, and I got to stay up pretty late. Let me tell you about my family real fast. First, there's my mother. I never called her mom or anything like that. I just called her by her first name, Janice. She didn't mind at all, though. I called her that for so long, I don't think she even noticed. Anyhow, she was a very kind woman. I think that she is the one who recommended my adoption in the first place. Sometimes I'd lay on my head against her in front of the television and she would tickle my back with her nails. She is one of those Hollywood mothers. Second, there's Dad. His real name was Richard, but he never really liked me much, so I began to refer to him as Dad in a desperate attempt to gain his affection. That's so sad.
That is.
It didn't work. I think that no matter what I called him, he would never love me as much as his own child. That's understandable, so I really didn't press the matter. The most notable attribute of Dad was his unmoving sternness. He was not afraid to pop his children when they did something wrong. Pop his children, I assume.
Strike them.
Yeah, strike them. I found that out before I could use the restroom properly. He didn't hesitate to spank me. Well, I'm in line, and it's because of his methods. Lastly, there's my sister. Little Emily was really young when I was adopted, so we were about the same age, but she was slightly older. I like to think of her as my little sister, though. We got along better than any sibling could possibly get along. We would always stay up late together and just talk. Well, she did a lot of the talking. I mostly just listened because I loved her. It was a great setup that we had. We were short on bedrooms, so because I didn't want to sleep in the living room by myself when I was little, I had a pallet set up for me next to her bed on the floor. This is where I have slept since. But it was cool with me because I enjoyed being with her and I'd always felt pretty protective of my little sis. Everything changed on a horrible Wednesday night. I was at home taking a nap when little Emily opened the front door. The sound of the door opening pulled me to a state of consciousness and I walked from the room down the hall to the living room. That's when I first remembered it was Wednesday. I was never good at keeping track of what day it was. Actually, I'll just go ahead and say it. My sense of time was horrible. But nevertheless, I knew it was Wednesday because Emily had just come home from her church's youth group gathering. She walked in the front door and hugged me, and then was followed in by Dad and Janice. "You have a good nap?" Janice said teasingly as she ruffled my hair up. I just shook my head away and snorted in a manner that clearly expressed that I was teasing back with her. "Don't you snort at your mother like that," said my father gruffly with authority. He shut the door behind him and hung up his coat. I was clearly joking, I growled under my breath. He must not have heard me because I didn't feel him smack me. Emily then proceeded to our room and I followed. She started telling me about her day. You know, usual teenage girl stuff, but I listened so that she would feel better. After her summary, she suggested watching TV, and I obliged and jumped onto the couch as she was going for the remote. She rolled her eyes at my little brother-like immaturity and scooted me over and sat down. The TV turned on, and we watched it together until the sun went down. Emily was the kind of girl that, instead of watching cartoons and soap operas, would rather watch Discovery and Animal Planet and Natural Geographic. That's what the channel's called, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's National Geographic Channel, and there was a National
Geographic. This is Natural Geographic.
That's
I think
national.
they meant national.
Maybe it's a copyright thing. They can't put
Oh,
National
yeah.
Geographic. I'm kidding. It's a Pastatime.
Oh.
They give a shit.
I like those too, so I didn't mind. Actually, those were the only channels that could hold my attention. So it got late and Janice walked up behind the sofa. "Emily, it's past your bedtime. Turn off the television and go to your room." "You too," she pointed at me. Emily turned off the program we were watching grudgingly and stood up. She started down the hallway to our room. As I followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. We went into our room and Emily turned off the light. Just as she did, I caught a flash of movement out of the corner of my eye. It was out the window. But as soon as I redirected my line of sight to where the window was no longer in my peripheral vision, what it was that I thought I saw was gone. I still remained alert. for my sister's sake. I laid there in the darkness with nothing but the thin ray of light from the street lamp outside to illuminate the room. It wasn't much. Time and time again, I could have sworn that I heard subtle sounds just outside the window. A twig break, leaves crunching, clothes jostling, and all the while I could smell a faint stench of sweat and blood. I kept my eyes open most of the night. The sounds outside subsided, and the smell left my nose. I began to feel at ease, and my eyelids closed.
That rhymed.
Not long after that, I heard a very loud crash on the other side of the house. I was up in an instant. "There's someone in the house!" I barked with extreme adrenaline coursing through me. "Wake up!" I shrilly pleaded with Emily. She did, and as soon as I saw her sit up, I ran to my parents' room. Dad was dead. His neck was splayed open and gaping as blood spilled out of it, off the bed and onto the floor. I saw that the master bedroom's door was closed, and just before it, on the outside, was a man. A man. I don't feel comfortable calling it that. He was very large and rugged. He turned around and saw me, and that's when I saw him accurately for the first time. I won't forget it. His eyes were large and beady and trapped with lust. He was styling a beard that was badly unkempt with blood dripping off of it. His clothes were dirty and his face was cold. Just then, I noticed the same horrid smell of sweat and blood from earlier, but this time it was overwhelming. He saw me and grinned with a set of crooked yellow teeth. The smile threw me off. I thought that I was going to die, but then he turned back to the bathroom door completely unperturbed by my presence. I was terrified and didn't know what to do. I just yelled and cried. I watched as he shouldered through the door that was Mom's only protection. I watched as he raised the large razor that he was carrying, but had obviously neglected to use properly. I watched as he sliced her open and tore her to shreds.
Jesus Christ.
I then heard something, the last thing that I wanted to hear. It was Emily's scream coming from behind me. The large monstrosity looked up from my butchered mother and stared at my little sister. I was distraught. He stood up and quickly started walking towards us. My sis turned and ran, and I was at a loss when he bypassed me and went straight after her. Why was she still in the house? Had she not assessed the situation and run? Apparently not, and now she was dead and I was alone. I ran after them both. I expected the man to kill her as he had the rest of my family, but I was sadly mistaken. He grabbed her by the arm and jerked her away to make clear that he was in control. He dragged her through the house. I was making all the noise I could now, hoping and praying that someone would come to my aid. He mustn't take her. Not her. As he passed me, I backed against the wall and whimpered with terror. Why? He didn't respond except by putting his free hand on my head while Emily screamed in the other and saying, "Good boy." He gave another crooked grin and a very cold, unnatural laugh. I followed him to the door where he dragged my helpless sister after him. He opened it, pulled her out, and slammed it shut behind him. I'm now sitting in the house with my mutilated adopted parents, shivering and whimpering with dismay. He's out there with her, doing who knows what, and I can't do anything. I would if I could, but I can't. I would chase after them in a heartbeat, but I can't. I sit here, looking at the front door. I look down at my paws. If only I could open doors.
Wow.
He's a dog.
What a twist.
What a twist. And I hadn't actually read through the entire thing before. So when I mentioned how animals get torn away from their parents, right away, because they're too young to tell, I didn't even think about it. But yeah, he's a dog.
Hearing it, I want to read through it again and see how much of it changes based off the fact that he's a dog. Because it's is he actually watching his human family get murdered? He says
growl. He says bark.
Well, obviously,
he says a bunch of different stuff like that. But it's a real family.
So they're real humans.
Yeah, because how we say that we're our dogs are our kids,
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
And he refers to his sister.
Yeah.
Is that another dog or is that a human child?
It's a human child.
Okay. Interesting.
That's why that guy was just good boy. You just stay here. I'm going to go take this kid.
I think our corgi would be the type of dog that would fly off the handle and attack this intruder.
Yeah.
I think our sheebs would definitely be the one that got petted and said, "Good girl."
Yeah.
She'd just watch and be like, "Oh, this is horrible." But I mean, all I can do is watch. So.
Yeah. Namaria would just be like, "All right, cool. I'm going to run out the door as soon as you open it.
Yeah, as soon as you open the door, I'm leaving and finding a new family, which I've been waiting to do forever.
Yui would definitely try and tear, like, this person's arm.
Well, this was a really horrific story.
Yeah.
Told from the perspective of a dog. So, good stuff. Good choice. Doors is a really weird name for it, but I guess it makes sense because of the twist at the end. So,
yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Good pick, Robin.
Doggy doors, maybe. Name it that instead. I don't know.
That would just
But it would give away the thing. Okay,
It's a dog. That's what the fucking name of the story should be. Not really. I liked it. Good stuff. So before we move into our next story, we are going to take a really quick commercial break. And we're back. So I'm going to move into our next and final Pastatime of this Pastatime, creepypasta of this Pastatime. And this one's title is Knock on Wood. Sounds
hot.
Starts out like this. Rain began to fall from a rapidly darkening sky, spattering the dense forest and the tiny one-room cabin Timothy stared out of. The hours of the day were waning as the storm rolled in. Tim wishing there was more time to be searching, while Joe sat wondering how the hell he had wound up in the middle of nowhere. The Jefferson Memorial Forest just outside of Louisville, Kentucky, to be more precise. The rain's rhythmic tapping on the wood above soothed Tim initially, but with the retreating sun, the sound had become eerily similar to footsteps. The storm moving in was massive, making Tim and Joe all the more grateful for stumbling onto this rundown cabin deep in the forest. Tim took his eyes off the window, glancing in Joseph's direction, who sat a mere 8 feet away, his back pressed up against the opposite wall as his fingers deftly moved through a leather-bound journal. Jesus, Joseph said, your brother really did his homework. The journal was simultaneously the source of Timothy's relief and fear. Its presence here reminded him that his decision to come looking for his brother had been the right one. Chris, despite being the oldest, was the free spirit of the family, and it often fell to Tim to be the responsible one, in particular when it came to cleaning up Chris's messes. Chris was prone to taking sabbaticals in the woods, but none had ever lasted this long. Chris's boss had called Tim a few days ago, worried when Chris hadn't shown up for work following his vacation. No one had heard from Chris since he set out into the forest, and no sign of him remained with the singular exception of this journal. The journal's contents, however, continued to set Tim on edge, even as his mind attempted to focus on anything else. Listen to this, Joe said as he read. According to your brother, quote, an agitar is an evil woodland spirit that spreads pestilence and disease, making ill any who look upon its face. It is often depicted as a snake-like creature, and although originally found in Finnish mythology, has been depicted throughout the world in similar illustrations from numerous cultures.
All right.
Most cultures around the world have always depicted evil as a snake or a half-snake, Tim replied, reciting words Chris had once spoken to him. Chris always had to become an expert on anything that interested him, he continued. Far too often, an argument with Chris left his opponent feeling like an uninformed fool. Compared to most, Tim often found himself as the one who looked like a genius. This would be a point of pride for most folks, but his older brother Christopher was on a separate level entirely. As kids, they were both recognized as gifted, but Chris's ambition and focus meant the comparison didn't last long, as his genius began to outpace his brother rapidly. That growing intelligence had left Tim behind, always following in his brother's footsteps for better or worse. He felt lucky in one major aspect. Being at the head of the pack everywhere you went, carried with it a curse. Isolation. Even as a kid, Chris wound up alone socially the vast majority of the time. Childhood friends stopped coming by when there were no longer shared interests, and even Tim had to put forth an effort to find interest to share with his own brother. Now, as adults, Tim knew he was all Chris had. Chris had allowed himself to believe that Timothy's friends were his as well, but nothing could be further from the truth. Joseph wasn't here for Chris, and Tim knew that. Joseph was a great friend, but not Chris's friend. Joseph was here because he didn't want Tim to do this alone. He loved and hated him for that, seemingly in equal measure. Tim's thoughts caught up with him, and he realized he was staring while Joseph had resumed speaking. I'm just talking to myself over here, Joseph said, tossing the journal halfway to Tim. The notebook landed on the floor with a thud. I hope he didn't come out here looking for all this nonsense. He'd have to be completely nuts to think he'd actually find something out here. He found this cabin, Tim reminded Joe. Their initial search had been tumultuous to say the least. Joseph insisted they turn back almost immediately, and Tim didn't exactly blame him. There was no way to know if Chris was even here. Tim assured him this was the likeliest place, but hid back the sad truth. This wasn't the first time Chris had disappeared into these woods. It wasn't the first time Tim had come to pull him back to society. The unspoken truth hung in the air, and an uncomfortable silence stretched out as Tim clenched his jaw, reluctant to say any more. Night settled in along with the storm, the darkness amplified by the clouds above. The two were already exhausted, and the pitch black of the night was chased off only by a camping lantern they had brought with. Joseph dimmed the light on the lamp before lying down on the uneven wood floor, falling asleep quickly after. Tim leaned against the wall, looking out the small window at the dense forest surrounding the cabin. He turned the lamp off, its dim light finally vanishing in the darkness, seeming absolute in his new night-blind state. Initially, his eyes could not make out the foliage, but after a few minutes of sitting in the dark, he began to pick out the silhouettes of trees, large and small, all swaying fiercely from left to right. Hedges and bushes leaned as far as their roots would allow, clinging to the ground for fear of being carried away by the wind. The illusions of footsteps from the drops of rain had vanished with the arrival of the storm. The noise was now vicious in the cabin as the storm battered the roof. It held true, not a single leak to be seen. He wondered how long that would last in these conditions. Despite the night's coolness, Tim licked the moisture from his upper lip. The taste of salt made his stomach ache, his eyes then finding the pack on the ground near Joe. He considered the amount of food that they had left only briefly before standing to retrieve a bit of jerky. He knuckled soreness in his lower back as he stood, regretting not bringing a sleeping bag. Thoughts of what would come in the morning danced in Tim's mind as he silently retrieved the food and returned to his spot against the wall. There was one truth he knew he would need to voice to Joseph in the morning, a truth he would not like to hear. Chris was out in these woods somewhere, and Tim had no intention of returning without him. Preparing mentally for a confrontation was a way of life for Tim. His brother had made sure every interaction felt like a duel for as long as he could remember. Lost in thought, he jerked back against the wall with a start when the darkness was interrupted. His head collided with the wood with a soft thud. A brilliant blue light illuminated the landscape outside the window.
Aliens.
Trees and bushes shone wonderfully in Tim's eyes, each branch and each leaf moving with those around them as if caught up in a dance to some wonderful music Tim could not hear. The light disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Tim's dark-adjusted eyes squinting from its brilliance, the images still present when he blinked. Thunder exploded into the night, rattling the old logs that made up the skeleton of the tiny cabin, the fierceness of the noise causing Tim's shoulders to curl up as his head ducked down instinctively, the vibration rattling the walls, shooting into his back as chills crawled down his spine.
Everyone loves a good vibration.
I hate you so much. Every piece of foliage outside the window swayed frantically in a different direction from the thunderous boom that had torn through the air, the smaller trees looking like thin creatures trying to scatter to find shelter in the night, but instead found themselves stuck in place as they struggled desperately to get away. Each breath came more rapidly now, the sweat no longer confined to his upper lip, as small balls beaded down his cheeks.
No one likes small balls.
It was cold in here, but his body didn't act like it. This wasn't the sweat of heat. He was nervous. This did not surprise him. He was in an awful situation and Joseph was with him. A horrendous storm beat at their shelter, but still, his nerves seemed frayed for a reason he could not identify, almost in an instinctive way. By the time Tim had recovered and replaced himself against the wall, the sky lit up the tree line again, Tim's eyes squinting at the light as his body steeled itself for the next boom. Muscles stiffened, fists clenched, and Tim set his jaw with determination as his eyes fell upon something that froze him in a completely different way. Amidst the swaying foliage stood a silhouette, unmoving in the night's chaos.
Well, that's terrifying.
The surrounding forest heaved against the wind of the storm, thrashing violently from side to side. Tim's eyes would have missed the silhouette had it moved the way the rest of the forest did, but it stood perfectly still, undisturbed by the world around it, some unknown sentinel in the night. The thunder cracked out, foliage trying to uproot and run yet again, but the figure remained tranquil in the night's disarray. A cold breeze found passage through a crack in the wood, ruffling Tim's shirt as it rushed up his back. He lurched forward instinctively, feeling as though something's icy touch had tried to seize hold of him. The journal blew open from the draft, pages flapping about as the gust assailed the room. Tim put his hand over a small opening between logs, feeling where the draft had emerged as it began to subside. He quickly glanced back to the window, peering into the tree line to where the silhouette had stood. His eyes searched frantically for where the figure had been standing, finding nothing. His muscles tensed tightly, near cramping, arms and hands shaking rapidly. Whatever he had seen was gone now, if it had ever been there in the first place. "You're losing it," he thought to himself. "Keep it together. Someone has to." The words helped him find enough courage to stop shaking. He glanced towards Joe, who lay sleeping peacefully on the rough floor. The sight did little to soothe Tim. His eyes moved slowly away and stopped at the journal that lay open now on the floor, merely a foot away from Joe's back. The darkness did not permit Tim's eyes to tell what was on the page. As if in response to the thought, another flash of lightning lit the room, revealing a single word that was written larger and bolder than the rest atop the page. Agitar. Tim's eyes flashed back to the landscape just outside the window, searching again for the silhouette, or the remnants of whatever his rational mind reasoned it could have been. Nothing remained where the figure had stood but emptiness. The thrashing forest waved in unison again.
It just reminds me of Army of the Dead type stuff.
Army of the Dead?
Or not Army of the Dead, but the first one.
You mean Army of Darkness?
Not Army of... Yeah, Army of Darkness.
I'm like, there's only one,
Army
and it's not
of the
good.
Dead is not good. I meant Army of Darkness, but the one before Army of Darkness.
Evil Dead?
Evil Dead. That's what it reminds me of. It's like this thing in the forest that's making it windy and blowing shit around, and you know what I mean?
A little bit. I can see that. All right, I'm going to keep going.
God, fucking Army of the Dead. God dang it.
It's like that Zack Snyder movie about Las Vegas?
No, that movie
and
is...
zombies?
Movie is not good. This is not good.
Tim sat and stared through the window, eyes unblinking even when the lightning came again. The storm gained intensity, and the lightning came regularly, forcing him to squint but never forcing his eyes closed. Exhaustion crept back into his bones as he sat still, and eventually his heavy eyelids fluttered on their own before closing. Images danced through the emptiness of his fitful sleep, popping to life to play themselves out briefly, before fading out or shifting to different images without notice. It was the dreams of a restless night, with one event rarely ending before shifting to something else, and that new piece of the dream always started nowhere near the beginning, or whatever event was taking place. Chris and Tim ran through the woods, moving as fast as their tiny legs could carry them, their cousins hot in pursuit. He had the limitless stamina dreams afforded you, close to what he had actually had as a child. The woods behind their grandparents' house flowed by rapidly as he ran, but he was suddenly stopped as Chris seized his arm and pulled him behind a tree. "Stay still," Chris's soft voice whispered. "The night will hide us."
What?
He was excited and scared all at once. Crunching leaves grew closer and closer as Tim instinctively clenched his eyes shut. The crunching stopped abruptly, and as Tim opened his eyes, his sight was filled with bright, white light. The light took in Chris, who was older now, who sat across from him in a room not much bigger than the cabin. Chris sat on a padded floor, his back against a padded wall. This image was as familiar as the day it actually took place, and played out to Tim even when awake on some days. The room was only 8 foot long and 8 foot wide. The only things that filled the padded cell were Chris and Tim and their parents, and Chris's constant ramblings. "You think you can live your life in peace, but they'll come for you," Chris said, words running out over one another as if the passage to exit may close if they didn't rush out all at once. "They will," he continued. "They'll come for you." His eyes were wide, furious and fearful all at once, staring directly at Tim. Their father said something, commanding Chris to stop rambling, to stop being foolish, to act right. But those words came out like shouts from underwater, muffled the moment they were released. "When you least expect it," Chris warned, "they'll come for you." His eyes held a desperate pleading that Tim had never noticed when the image played out as a memory of his past. Eyes finally breaking free of Chris's intense gaze, Tim's head snapped to the right, and he slammed them shut, wishing away the scene. They opened to reveal Chris sitting on his weathered brown corduroy chase lounge that currently occupied his forever messy apartment.
Sounds like an ugly-ass chair.
Yeah, agree.
Okay.
This hadn't been long ago, but it felt like another lifetime. Tim sat on the hardwood floor of Chris's living room looking at his brother. "A Waldgeist," Chris corrected. "It's from European mythology. Hunters and woodsmen used to knock as hard as they could against the largest, oldest tree they could find to wake them. They were the protector spirits of the forest, and waking them would ensure no evil came to them." "Sounds like something a pagan would believe," Tim replied, looking back to his book. Chris looked up from the leather-bound journal in his hand, smiling. "People still believe this today. The only people I've ever seen do it are Christians. You do it all the time." Chris's smile made Tim feel stupid, as usual, the words a clue to puzzling out his meaning. A moment passed, and the window over Chris's shoulder revealed a raging storm outside, with lightning flashing brightly. Was that window always there? Tim thought to himself.
Well, that's creepy.
The room filled with bright purple-blue light that flashed just outside the window, forcing Tim's eyes shut with each streak. He opened them to find the room completely dark, thunder booming and shaking the wooden floor beneath him, suddenly made of lumpy old logs. Chris still sat in his chase lounge, eyes looking at him expectantly. Expectant and fearful, Tim realized. His mind raced, the words repeating around him, "You do it all the time," being spoken from his brother's unmoving lips. The dream was leaving him, pushing him out. He hadn't paid attention to the words when they were spoken to him in waking life, but here they seemed important beyond measure. Tim looked back at his brother, mouth opening to yell at him, to ask him what he was trying to tell him. The room was silent as his words poured out. Thunder boomed overhead again, and the ground rattled even more violently this time. A sound pierced through the silence, a loud thud coming from the door as it rattled from impact on its loose, rusted metal hinges. Again the sound came, louder this time, the door shaking from the weight of the blow, nearly coming free where it stood.
So this thunder or lightning storm or whatever is just coming closer to them, right?
Something's trying to get in the door.
All right.
Something's hitting the door. Tim looked back to his older brother, eyes desperate and afraid. Not afraid for himself, Tim realized. The door shook a third time, the violence sending splinters flying towards Tim, hands raising to protect his eyes on their own. The door barely protected the entrance to the room, sagging sideways on the one hinge that remained fastened in place. "Do it all the time," the words repeated in his ears, eyes growing wide with understanding. Tim's hand clenched into a fist, knocking hard on the floor, the wood thudding softly against his knuckles. The sound that came from it wasn't a thud, though. Instead, each rap rang out like a bell chime. He struck 3 times, each one harder than the last. Knock on wood, he thought, as he struck the floor. Relief covered Chris's face as a real smile replaced his mocking one. A smile Tim had not seen in so long he didn't remember it existed until that moment. The window over Chris's shoulder revealed the sun breaking apart the clouds, the warm light shining into the room, washing over Tim. Chris's smile disappeared entirely, though, as his eyes gained a serious edge, seizing Tim's. "Don't let it in," Chris said.
That's creepy.
Voice barely audible as the dream blurred and faded into an impossibly white light that swallowed everything in sight. Tim's eyes closed as he shook his head, trying to clear the image. They opened as his head settled to reveal a dark room surrounding him. Floor and walls made of old, worn logs, light blinking into existence from the window to reveal Joe laying on the floor a few feet away from him, eyes closed as his chest rose and fell slowly while he slept.
So that whole thing was a dream sequence.
Correct.
Okay.
"Joe," Tim said, voice gruff from sleep. Joe remained sprawled out on the floor, eyes still closed. "Joe!" Tim's shout came out filled with anger, harsher than he had intended, and Joe's eyes snapped open, wide with shock before narrowing as he rubbed them with the back of his hand. "What?" "Go back to sleep," Joe snapped, laying his head back to the floor. "How long have you been asleep?" Tim said, raising to his feet and moving to the window. The trees all leaned severely, Tim wondering how much more they could bend without snapping like twigs. He noticed a dampness splashing in through the crack in the wall the wind had come from earlier. The rain was now coming down sideways.
Ooh, so windy outside.
"How long?" Tim said, nudging Joe's legs. "I don't know," Joe said, stumbling to his feet, anger painted across his face. "I went to sleep as soon as I dimmed the light." His steps were staggered from fatigue, and his foot landed on the journal still on the ground. The journal slid, sending Joe's feet out from under him, arms reaching out to empty air as he collapsed into a heap against the rough wood floor. "I don't need this shit," Joe shouted, hand reaching to the back of his head, revealing a dark color on his fingers. The darkness still held the room in its thrall, save for the flashes of light from the storm.
"You mustn't read from the book."
"What are you going to do? Just leave in the middle of the storm?" Tim said, trying to force humor into his voice. But he had failed. "Maybe I will," Joe shouted as he rose purposefully to his feet. Fatigue no longer staggered his steps. "I'd have to be, I don't know, completely fucking crazy to go wandering in the woods on my own, right?" The words cut Tim deep. He knew the frustration had been bubbling up when the storm had arrived, and now it was clearly about to boil over. But hey, that's why we're here, isn't it? To look for your fucking brother who just wandered out here, or some other godforsaken place because he knew you'd come to bring him back. "You know what?" Tim replied. "Maybe you should go out into the storm. It'll be better than me knocking you the fuck out." The two stared daggers at each other as the storm battered the cabin with wind and rain, lightning flashing frequently enough where the darkness was almost completely forgotten. Finally, Joe looked away and started walking towards the door. Tim stepped forward and reached out, grabbing his arm to stop him. Joe's free arm shoved him to the wall as soon as he came into range. "Enjoy going at this alone." Joe's hand extended to the weathered brass knob as a memory of a warning entered Tim's mind through the haze of a forgotten dream, playing back the last thing his brother had said. Don't let it in. He heard it play in his head in Chris's voice. No, don't, Tim shouted as Joe threw open the door. Tim leaned forward slowly to look out the door as Joe stood very suddenly still. They stood staring at a frozen landscape, trees standing upright, bushes unwavering, rain and wind gone like thieves in the night. The silence rang so loud Tim nearly covered his ears. Joe looked at Tim, brow furrowed in bewilderment. His eyes were wide with confusion and fear. The storm had vanished. Tim's dream rushed back into his memory as if breaking free from imprisonment, replaying all at once and ending on that final warning yet again. Close the door, Tim shouted, surging forward, moving as if stuck in mud. His hands gripped the side of the door, swinging it on its hinges so violently he feared it would wrench free of the wood. Moments before the door closed, an impact rocked the small cabin that knocked Tim and Joe off their feet and sailing through the air. Tim's eyes clenched shut as splinters assailed his face, some large, some small. Cracking wood filled his ears as he seemed to float through nothingness, reality catching up as he slammed into the wooden floor of the cabin, pain shooting through his chest as he landed. His eyes opened to reveal the back wall of the cabin leaning outwards as if shoved by some powerful invisible hand.
Whoa.
The roof was collapsing in as the wall slowly leaned further out, finally giving way to the impact. The roof came crashing down. Tim curled his body into the fetal position, arms coming up around his head as the logs from above fell around him, most separating from one another as they rapidly descended, but some falling in groups of 2 or 3. Many had splintered too. The few that struck Tim were as big as logs for a bonfire, but not the massive logs that made up the actual structure. They hurt when they made contact, but though they did not do any major damage that he could tell. The wood groaned and thudded against the remnants of the cabin as the back wall crashed to the forest floor. Tim's eyes slowly peeked open after a moment, revealing the still, serene forest above. The front wall had been shattered, the side walls separating, logs rolling into the cabin or out onto the forest floor. Tim quickly looked around the room and took in the sight of Joe sitting upright, struggling to free his legs from underneath a large log. Tim brushed debris off of his person and struggled to his feet, then made his way to Joe. We have to get out of here, Tim said, hands frantically searching for a hold on the log across Joe's ankles. Now. Tim interlocked his fingers under the log and was able to lift it high enough for Joe to struggle out. Did we just get hit by lightning? Joe said, words coming out in sharp breaths, mouth twisted to match a pain-racked face. Something had caught him in the collapse besides the log on his ankles. That wasn't lightning, Tim said, gingerly touching Joe's ankles as his hands flinched back when a yelp escaped from Joe. Something's broken, Joe said, hands extending towards his legs, shaking from pain. Wait, how do you know it wasn't lightning? None of the wood is burned, Tim replied, eyes rapidly searching the darkness of the tree line. I'm carrying you. The silence began to lift around them at those words, a soft whisper rising in Tim's ears. Joe held up his arms for shelter, expecting the rain to return, clearly convinced the droplets striking leaves were the source of the rising noise. Tim was upright, and much to his dismay could see the true source of the noise. The leaves on the ground rustled against one another, moving inwards from the tree line in serpentine patterns. The motion caused them to rub against one another, and the gaps as they shifted slightly revealed scales beneath the underbrush. The whisper continued to rise until it became a hiss as Tim reached out, seizing Joe's hands. He tried to pull him forward, but Joe would not budge. Tim took in Joe's eyes, wide with fear, face frozen, limbs so stiff that they trembled, and his gaze fixed over Tim's left shoulder at a space he knew should be empty. Tim's hands flashed to the cabin floor, seizing a large splinter of wood in each hand and struck them together 3 times with a sharp clack. The hissing rose to a feverish pitch at the sound, leaves rustling violently, serpentine pattern rapidly changing to rush back towards the tree line. Tim struck the splinters together twice more, eyes still fixed on Joe's. A hideous hiss erupted behind him like a geyser unleashing its pent-up stores into the air, twigs cracking on the forest floor, branches thrashing and snapping as they gave way. The sound hadn't driven off whatever it was, but it had made it draw back just far enough. Joe finally looked at Tim. Keep hitting these together, Tim said, handing the sticks to Joe in his quavering hands.
It's like the fucking thing from Parent Trap, where the twins tell the evil possible step lady, like, if you smack these 2 sticks together, you'll scare away the bobcats or the mountain lions.
Just like it. Whatever you do, Tim said as he pulled Joe over his shoulders, don't look at its face.
Ah, jeez.
Tim struggled to his feet, begging his adrenal glands for their support, moving as quickly as he could back into the wilderness. The forest floor was soaked and each step treacherous, mud holding to his feet, relinquishing them with each step reluctantly with a sucking sound. The clacking continued to ring out as Tim's feet moved in cadence with the noise. Leaves and branches scraped at his face like grasping fingers, his eyes squinting for protection while trying to find their way in the darkness. The trees swayed and branches broke all around him, which were the sounds of pursuit, growing closer as the clacking began to soften. Joe increased his fervor suddenly, causing Tim's head to attempt to glance at the cause. Darkness had made the terrain treacherous, but losing focus was Tim's undoing. The cadence of the splinters clacking was finally interrupted by the thud of Tim's toes striking hard against an oak tree's thick, twisted root, hidden by the darkness. His eyes went wide as he lurched forward, wind rushing past his face as the ground underneath rushed up to meet him, as Joe came down on his back. The wind fled from Tim's lungs as Joe spilled from his back and shoulders from the momentum of the fall, grunting as he struck the ground and rolled down the slope ahead. Joe's panicked breaths came rapidly as his empty hands grasped desperately for the forest floor. A shadow then shot out of the trees ahead, smashing through the underbrush, snapping tree limbs off as it slithered through the darkened forest. Tim opened his mouth to shout and reached his hand out helplessly as the shadow came upon Joe. A horrendous scream pierced the night, Joe wailing in terror as the creature's all-too-human-looking arms enveloped him in a horrible embrace. Thin, razor-sharp claws dug into Joe's back as the creature lifted him effortlessly to its chest, making its way back into the surrounding darkness. Joe's screams continued on for a brief moment, once out of sight, and then came to an abrupt end. The sickening silence lasted only a moment before water rushed from the treetops downward, crashing down over Tim.
Well, that's just terrifying.
The storm was finally allowed entry into the night again. Tim lay frozen in the mud, eyes fixed in terror at where Joe once lay moments ago. Lightning flashed again, and the massive boom overhead snapped Tim out of his lethargy. He bolted to his feet and ran desperately into the night, heading in the direction he hoped would take him back to civilization. His legs moved faster than they ever had before, swiftly carrying him, rain and foliage stinging against his face as it struck. Roots snagged his feet, some breaking free, others causing him to stumble, but never fall. Each stumble saw him return upright and continue on, face throbbing, lungs burning. He ran into the night until his legs had no strength left, his abdomen splitting with pain from trying to pull in enough air. He pushed on despite his body reaching its limits. He had no idea how far he had run, he just knew it was not far enough. Finally, he collapsed, knees sinking into the mud as his hands came to rest on a large oak root. His head sagged to the ground as he gasped for air, trying to rise again to flee as the storm crashed down on him. His body would have none of it. His thighs screamed in agony when he tried to rise, his abdomen cramping so tight it hunched him over. He was so lost in his attempt to flee, he did not notice the rain stop again. The sounds of his gasping filled the deadly silent forest yet again, and just as he felt as though he had regained his wind, his breaths were suddenly accompanied by longer, deeper breaths being drawn in directly above him. Each exhale carried with it a long, raspy hiss that stung Tim's ears. Tears rolled down his face from clenched eyes. Body trembling from exhaustion as fear as the warmth of the Agitar's breath rolled over the back of his neck. The hissing grew closer, sharp nails sliding onto his back, stinging as they cut through his shirt at the slightest touch. His right hand made a fist, and he tapped his knuckles softly on the oak root. "Knock on wood," he whispered, voice quivering as it escaped him. A loud boom split the air, duller than thunder, but no less powerful. A savage, angry hiss accompanied the nails pulling from Tim's sides. A second boom rang out, followed by thrashing and violently splitting wood, splinters raining down on Tim's back. A third boom came, and its sound was alone as it echoed through the woods. Tim felt the rain return, the water stinging his back as it made contact where the claws had just been. He remained crouched, hands on the oak root, exhaustion, relief, and remorse sweeping over him all at once. Darkness drew him down for the second time this night, and despite his efforts to stay conscious, he collapsed. Tim's eyes opened to light that blinded him. Not like the dream from earlier, but sunlight from the morning freshly broken. No images had danced in his mind while he lay unconscious on the forest floor. Time had passed by as his body rested until finally feeling replenished enough to allow his eyes to flutter open. Above him stood the largest tree he had ever seen, deeply scored all over the trunk directly above where he lay. He ran his fingers over the wood, feeling the smooth cuts under his fingers. He craned his neck backwards, looking upwards toward the treetop to see the blue sky peeking out from behind the clouds. He drew relief in along with breath into his lungs, and then realized slowly as he exhaled and began to tremble that Joe was gone. Chris was still missing. He couldn't explain it to anyone. He'd be the one in the padded cell this time. People had known Joe had come to the forest with him. He would be the one held accountable if Joe was missing. The relief had faded as his horrific choice set in. Would he lie about what happened to Joe? Or would he tell the truth and wind up in that padded cell himself? Where was his brother? He looked backwards towards where he had come in the night and realized slowly that the only way out was to go deeper in.
What?
To find his brother, to find his friend, or what remained of him. As relieved as he had been, he had a long road ahead of him. He hung his head, gritted his teeth, and took the first step back towards the cabin.
No. No.
The end.
No. Why would you walk...
Question mark?
Why would you walk back to the... Fuck that. No.
Okay, well, what would you do if you were in this exact situation at that moment?
Try to find my way out. Not go
What
back
would you do
towards
when you
the
got
cabin.
out and everyone's like, where's so-and-so? Where's Joe at?
I would be like, something was in the forest with us and it got Joe. We need to go back as a group and try and find them. Search party. Fucking get search and rescue. Get a fucking helicopter.
And when they eventually blame you for Joe's death or disappearance, you wind up in jail or in a padded cell.
It doesn't necessarily mean that. There's no evidence that you are the one that made him disappear.
So you just be committed, like, we're going to have this trial. I'm going to tell the truth. And even though everyone thinks I'm crazy, I'm going to go ahead and move forward.
But you're not
with it.
crazy. All you have to do is say something there got him. Some creature. It could be a bear. It could be a mountain lion. It could be something else. Not necessarily some big... You wouldn't say some big mystical creature. I don't know what it was.
Well, you just said you'd be like, something got him.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you just leave and be like, a bear got my friend. Can you help me find his body?
You just be like, some creature, some animal out there got him.
Yeah, but in that case, you're kind of being disingenuous and you're lying about it. Plus, your brother is still missing. Or in this case, your sibling.
You went out there with your friend to go find your brother, and he got caught by some creature. I wouldn't go back in there. I would go find help.
Okay.
That's me.
Well, this is rather unfinished. We can all agree on that. So there is an ending eventually for it. And just so y'all know, I wrote that one. That is something that I wrote in
No
college
wonder it's just
over
so
10 years ago.
Long.
Robin has been so critical of everything I've ever written. I was like, I'm not even going to let her read this until I read it myself. And I edited the fuck out of it. And the reason we were late for the episode is because I was still trying to decide what I would do for the ending.
Yeah, that's what took so long.
Took an
like,
extra 3 minutes
but,
or one Robin
but everyone
coffee break.
immediately was like, "Oh, it's Robin." No, it
that
wasn't.
does just go to show that that's how frequently we're late, and how frequently it's because Robin is taking her sweet ass time. But yeah, I have an ending in mind. Beside that,
Samantha says they would nope the fuck out.
Yeah, I figured most people would nope the fuck out.
Yeah,
so.
a lot of people would be like, "Nah, I'm good,"
including you. I would go back in.
No.
That's why it's written this way. Because,
Nope.
like, if my friend were gone and my brother were gone or just missing...
I noticed all the characters are named after your friends.
I wound up just randomly picking the names of the 3 people I had just hung out with. So it was Chris,
Tim and his
Joe,
brother.
and Tim.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with their dynamics in any way, shape, or form. It's just that Tim and Chris are actual brothers. So I was like, I guess I'll use those ones. So, but yeah. I hope you enjoyed that. And if you didn't, don't at me. So
Don't at me.
All right, so that is it for this episode of Pastatime. I want to thank everyone who watched us live, everyone who listened to the episode. We hope you enjoyed it. If you have a creepypasta that you have read that you would like us to read on the show, please email pastatime@scarish.com and say, hey, you guys should read this one. Or if you have a short story that is horror themed that you have written that you would like read on the show, you can also send those. Just send them to pastatime@scarish.com. You can let us know, hey, this is mine. You have permission to read it. And we will be more than happy to do so. It's always a good time when we get some ones from the community. And I shared mine this week, so I hope you folks enjoyed it. If you have a creepy story or something that actually happened to you in real life, a friend or a family member, you can reach out to storytime@scarish.com. If you let us know something that's happened and let us know we can share it, we'll put those on the other episodes where we go over creepy, paranormal, supernatural, spiritual, true crime, aliens type stuff that is supposedly real. And we would love to hear from you for those ones too. So again, storytime@scarish.com. If you want to reach out to us on our social medias, Facebook is facebook.com/scarishpodcast. Twitter is @scarishpod. And Instagram is @scarishpodcast. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/scarishpodcast. Those are monthly donations at different tiers. So tiers start at $1. At $1, you get ad-free, and you kind of get benefits the further you go up. There's physical merch tiers as well. And if you're not into the whole monthly subscription thing, you can also go to ko-fi.com/scarishpodcast. Those are one-time donations, and all your donations go to helping us upgrade our studio setup, kind of keep us going, kind of have us invest more into the show, more merch, more options,
more everything,
more. But thank you so much, everybody who's supported us for the past, 3.5 years. Thank you so much for making the show what it is. We couldn't do it without our lovely community, and we really appreciate it.
Indeed we do. And that is everything we have for this episode of Pastatime. So Robin, go ahead and sign us out.
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye-bye.
Happy Pride.